All right, welcome to today's session. We'll be talking about inter-service communication using REST, and we'll be making use of the different ways to do the REST calls. And one in particular that you are going to consider looking at is going to be the REST template and the web client. And then in the next session, we'll be able to talk about OpenFain. So we want to be able to make a request to our employee service and be able to get our data to do with the employee, and in return we get the data of the department info for this particular employee. And to just get started, we are going to open our employee service, then go to the controller. We are going to expose another controller endpoint, which is going to be on the employer controller. And in this case, we are going to expose an additional endpoint which will be able to expose details to do with the employee together with the department information. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a model that will be able to represent the employee with the department. So quickly, I'm going to create a new file within the model folder, and this is going to be employee with department.java, and this particular class is going to hold all the particular fields to do with the employee. And in this case, I'm going just to copy everything from here and put it here on the employee with the department. And in addition to that, we are going to have employee response, ideally the department response. So going to the other service of the department service, we're going to go and open the model folder, and we are going to have the department response. So we will be able to return in regard to the employee, we are going to have a department response. So this one can be duplicated within the employee service to be able to store for us the particular details of the employee. Now to do this, we are going to create another file which is going to be department response.java within the employee service, and this one is going to hold the same details as the department response from the department's service. All right, so we need to quick fix a few things here, add all missing imports, then the same thing on the new file of employee with the department. We are going to have those particular annotations to have the details. All right, so once you have this, I'm going to remove some of the simplification because this is going to be the response journey for these particular details. All right, so with this, we are very much sure that we are going to get the department information with together with the employee information. But then one thing that we need to have here, we need to have the department response added within this particular employee with the department. So we are going to have that as employee department response, and we are going to have that particular field as department response. So whenever we are returning employees with department, then we require to return the employee together with the department information. Once we have created these two models, we are going to go to our controller, and we are going to expose an additional endpoint here, which is going to be at get mapping. And this particular one, we are going to have /employee/ with the department. So I'm going to have the get mapping within with department. And this one is going to return a list of from util of employee with the department. Employee with the department, and we are going to get employees with department. All right, so we are going to have that, and then from there we don't need any request parameters for now. All right, so with this we are going to do a return of the same from the service class. So we are going to make use of employee service. We call a simple method to get employee with the department, employees with the department, employees with the department. We don't need any additional argument. Right, so we need to create this particular method within our class. So we are going to quick fix and create that particular method and go there, save. We need to do the implementation of this particular method within the implementation service of the employee. And to do that, we are going to quick fix and add an implemented method. And now down here you can see that this particular method is not implemented. So what we are going to do here is that we are going to fetch, the first thing that we are going to do is going to be the to do. We are going to fetch the list of employees. Alright, so we are going to fetch a list of employees. Then once you're done with that, we be able to, for each particular employee, we are going to make a REST call to get the department information. Department information for the employee. Right, so fetch. Alright, so once we are done that, then we'll be able to set for each particular employee, we're going to set the department information, and we be good. Now, one thing that we need to do here is that the employee has to know the department to which this particular employee belongs to. And to do that, we are going to check on our entity whether we are able to store the department. As you can see from our data, is that we haven't been storing the department to which this particular employee belongs to. So what we are going to do, we are going to introduce a private field which is going to be an indicator of the department ID. So we are going to have the department ID, which is going to be an integer field of department ID, and this one will be required. So whenever we are going to send our data, we need to have this one at required. So in this case, I'm going to have a column here, and this one is going to be name is going to be department DPT ID, right? So we are going to have DPT ID, and then we are going to say this is not going to be and not null. So we are going to ensure that this is not null. So we are going to have not null. So we are going to ensure that it's not null whenever it's being set. So definitely with this one, we also need to have it added within our employee create request, and that ideally will mean that we'd have a few changes within our employee create request. And whenever we are returning the payload, we won't be returning the department ID on the employee response. We'll be returning the actual details, but then also on the employee creation response, we are going to have that particular department ID returned. Right? So that's the few adjustments that we are making here. And on the saving process, so ideally what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop all the database for this one and recreate them so that we can be able to have the new fields. But then at the same time, within our resources file application, we can see that we have update. That means it's going to add that particular field automatically within our department. But then that means that we have to drop any existing data within that. So for now, I'm going just to return this one as null before we start embarking on making the inter-process call. Right, so once this is done, the next thing that we need to do is that we'll be making the call to the department service to get the department with this particular employee ID. So with that particular department ID, so that means we are going to return the department using the department ID, and we already have that particular method given here. So whereby we get the department response given a department number within the path variable. So already within the department control, everything is okay. Now let me open the terminal here and access my SQL. So I'm going to have docker exec -it mysql and then bash. So at the moment you don't have docker, so I need to start my docker desktop. to start MySQL. Alright, so MySQL is started, so let me access it. So I'm going to run the same again. Then from there we are going to access MySQL -u root -p. I'm going to make use of generic. Alright, so once we have access, show databases. As you can see, I have the employee DB and the department DB. So I'm going just to drop this table. Drop table department DB. Sorry, for department it's going to be there. So I'm going to drop the employee DB, and then drop database employee database employee. Then from there I'm going to recreate it so that I can have new data. So I'm going just to have create database. So with this I'm going to exit and check. Right, so once that is done, we have done the adjustment whereby we'll be able now to receive the employee create requests, and then we'll be able to ideally create that particular employee with a department. Now the next thing that we need to be aware of is whether we have access to the department. Ideally we should have maintained this one as open so that we can be able to see data. So we are going to use department DB. Right, so we are going to show tables. So you can see I have a TBL department, so I'm going to say select star from TBL department. So you can see we have 3 departments, one with ID 2, 3 and 4. So we are going to make use of this to illustrate the process of inter-service communication. Now once we have this done, I'm going to run this particular application and send the request. So let me go to the main application here, click run. Alright, so application is running, it's starting up. Right, so there are a few challenges here whereby we are being told that the dialect must be provided. So let me quickly provide the dialect. In this case, Jakarta persistence dialect. Automatically within this one, I'm going to make use of the same as on the department. So you can see the dialect. Alright, so as you can see, when we were working with Kubernetes, I'd removed the initial password and username and password, so that's why it was unable to get the connection to determine the dialect. But then once I've reintroduced this particular defaults, then you can see that my application is able to start. Now with this, let's just close all the files and then go to our REST call and make the creation of this particular employee. And in this case we are running on port 8080, so I'm going to make this call to port 8080, and with that we are going to send the request to create an employee from that API employee. And I'm going to create this particular employee, but then I need the department ID, so I'm going to add this one, department ID, and it's going to be ID2 from the DB, where we did see that we have already a department with ID2. So I'm going to create that particular employee with employee number 1, department ID2. Then I'm going to create another user or employee. In this case, this is going to be born in 1997, and then hire date is maybe 2022-0101 and department 3. Right, so I'm going to create those 2 employees. Then as you can see, if I list this particular employee, you'll be able to see that I don't have any details to do with the department information. So I'm going to reintroduce this one in our new endpoint. Right, so that is the main focus of mapping the department with the new employee. And now in that case, we are trying to do here, we have this particular department, employee with the department and department response. So what we're going to do is within our service implementation, we're going to first do the same thing that we did here, whereby we are getting the employee response, and whereby in this case we are finding everything. So I'm going just to do this stream again as we did here. So I'm going just to stream that data and return. So what you're going to return here is going to be employee repository.find or stream each particular employee and map that one into the employee with the department. So I'm going just to reintroduce that particular class there, and then from there we can be able to determine what next we need to do before that particular return. So for now, let me just introduce this one so that we can be able to see the kind of payload that we expect to have, and then we can be able to determine how you are going to autofill the department whenever we are using the other service. So I'm going to quickly make the call again to / within our controller. We have employee controller and we are going to have with the department. So I'm going just to have this particular endpoint to list all the details of employees. So I'm going to have another endpoint down here. This is going to be list employees with the department info. All right, so you're going to have that, and then this is going to be /API/employee with department. So it's going to be a GET request. So I'm going to send that, and you can see that here our department response is ideally null. Now the next question: how are we going to obtain the department information? By making reference to the other service. So to do that, we are going to make use of a REST call to the other service, and in this case I'm going to start up the department service so that we can be able to see that particular info. So whenever we have each particular department, this one I think is running on which other port, so they'll be conflicting ports and it won't be able to start. So I'm going to show you, we need to give it a different port as a whole for us to be able to start it. As you can see that the port 8080 is actually already in use. Now that our employee service is making use of port 80 by default, we need to specify a different port for the department service. And to do that, we need to go up here, and then we're going to have a new line, and we are going to do server, then colon, and then space port. Then we are going to make use of 8081 to have our department service. So if I restart that one service again, so let me restart it, we should be able to run the department service on port 8081. So let me start that one once again and quickly wait for it to complete. Alright, so you can see we are running now the department service on port 8081. So ideally what we are going to do here is going to be simple. Let me get my whiteboard. So what we are going to do is that whenever we make a call to the employee service to get the list, then in turn, once we access the DB with the information, we have our database here. We are going to make another call to the department service, supplying the ID of the department that we want, and then from that particular list, we'll be able to get a response back within the employee service, and then from there we'll be able to return a response which has the department information plus the employee information. That is what we are going to do ideally for this particular case. Right, so let me close off this and then we can be able to get started, ideally to get the new data from the employee service. So what we're going to do here, after we fetch this particular data. After we fetch this particular information, after mapping this one to the department, what I'm going to do, this particular list that we obtain here, we're going to assign it into another list. So what we're going to do here, we're going to, instead of returning, we're going to just have our return statement down here. It's going to be null for now. Alright, so I'm going to remove this particular return statement here. And once I've mapped that, I'm going to extract this one into a new field, new local variable, which is going to be department. This is going to be employees list. Right. So what we are supposed to do is that after getting this data from the DB and mapping it to the department, so for each particular employee within this list, we need to set the department. So what we're going to do with this new list, which is going to be employee list dot, we are going to stream, right? Then what we're going to do for each, we're going to do what? We are going to set the department. Now, this action is what we are going to remember. Now, how do we make external calls to other services? What allows us to make external calls to other services? So what we do, we have RestTemplate client. So I'm going just to RestTemplate. It's a RestTemplate class. So you'll be able to see that within Spring, we have a RestTemplate, and you can see that this particular class is actually deprecated since 3.0. So you can see that as of 6, let me expand this one. As you can see, as of 6.1, RestClient offers modern API for synchronous access. Now we are being advised that the RestClient and RestTemplate share the same infrastructure, but then we need to consider using the reactive web client. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how we are going to make use of the web client to make the call to the other microservice, because that is the suggested new client to make this particular calls. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open here, and what we're going to do, we're going to go to Spring Initializer project, and the web client is actually a dependency which is available on the web flags. So web client is actually available within the Spring Reactive Web, which is ideally this one. This dependency is all that we need to have our reactive framework or the web client within our project. So I'm going to add that one dependency within the original dependencies of the POM file, and I'm going to add it down here. Alright, so with this we'll be able to have the web client. Now to do that, we are going to come here under the config file. I'm going to create another file which is going to be called web client. So web client config.java. So I'm going to have this new class, and the first thing that I'm going to do is going to annotate this one at configuration. Alright, then with that we need to expose one particular bin, which is going to be web client builder. So bin, and then for this case we are going to have public, and in this case we are going to have a bin which is going to be web client, and then web client that way as the function, and then we are going to have the implementation. So we are going to make use of return web client dot builder dot build. So we are going to expose this particular instance by using the web client dot builder dot build. So that's all that we need to have our web client. Now within our service, which is the employee service, we are going to auto-wire the web client. Usually, for my case, I usually make those available using the final. So web client. So we're going to introduce web client here, and then copy that, add comma here, and automatically this would affect the constructor. So we need to duplicate this one and set the web client value to the new web client that will be supplied. Right, now here what you're going to do now, for each particular object that we are going to get, we are going to set the actual call. So before we do that, we are going to first obtain the endpoint whereby the department service is running. So what you're going to do, our URL is going to be something like this: http localhost 8081/API/department, then slash the department ID, let's say 1. So we are going to make a get call to an endpoint which looks this way. So we can confirm that using our rests within the department service, whereby you are getting a department by ID, whereby it's the host, API, department, and then the number, right? So getting that particular by number. So let me copy that and have it here. So we're going to make this call to 8081/API/department/department2. So that is a simple case. And then what we are going to get back is the department response. So to do that, we are going to do here for this particular action, I'm going just to set a simple case. We are going to have the employee in this case. Then within this, what we are going to do, we are going to make the call. So we are going to make use of WebClient.get. So what we are going to do, we are going to make a get call dot URI. We are going to make use of the URI. The URI is going to be in quotes. We are going to have this particular endpoint up to this point. It's going to be HTTP. Then we are going to concatenate it with the employee dot get the department get department info. So what we are going to do ideally is that for also the employee with the department, we need to introduce the employee number and the department ID. So we need to introduce the department ID within this particular employee with the department, so that we can have that also, so that we can be able to make use of it to make the call to the other external service. So in this case, we are going to make use of get department ID, right? So we are going to get, for this particular employee, we are going to obtain the department ID. Then from there, we are going to do ideally, let me just put them into new lines. Then from here, we are going to do retrieve. And then from there, the response that we are going to get, we are going to map it directly to body to mono. So we are going to make use of mono to get the actual class. So what particular response we are going to get is actually in JSON form, representing the department response. So we need to map it directly to the department response. So we are going to have that dot class. And then from here, we are going just to do what? We are going to do block. So we are going to block this particular operation. So that means we are going to make a web client call to the API department with that ID, and then we're going to get back a department. So let me assign that into a local variable here, which is going to be department dpt for now. Right now, for this particular employee, we are going to set its emp dot set department response is going to be the DPT that we have just obtained, and that is all that we need to do to get and set that particular data to that particular site. Now, once we are done with this, what we are going to do, we are going to return the employee list once we have set everything. All right. So we are going to set this one. At the same time, after streaming, you can generate a new value. At the same time, we can just quickly, instead of us returning this one, we can just quickly return from here. So we can make use of the return keyword, and then what we're going to do, we need to collect after streaming for each. I get it, not so. We already, the entire list has been affected. Now we can be able to return the list as it was. So sorry for that confusion a little bit. Yeah, so that's all that we need to do to have the call to the external service to get us the department information. So let me start. Application is started. Let me now make the call to the employee with the department, send that call, and our service, employee service, seems not started. So let me refresh the project. It's not. Let me restart the service ideally, so that we can be able to run it once again to pick the new values. It seems it's not able to do that. Let me go to the POM file and scroll up and quickly fix the load. I'm going to okay, so we need to reload the project. So let me Control-Shift-B, reload Java reload projects, so that we can be able to get the WebClient information compiled. And now let me try once again to start our service. Okay, let me run it from here. So cd employee service, cd employee service, mvn clean spring boot run. I think it's failing to refresh the dependencies. So with that, I'm running it. So it's rebuilding the Java files, and we'll be able to start it. Right, so everything is started. Now we can try to make the call. So let me make the call to the employee department, but then before that, I'm going just to open the department service and clear a terminal, so that you'll be able to see what is happening. So let's make this request, and you can see that host is not specified, so I need to quickly confirm which particular host, and this particular host is actually 8080. Why is it not going through? Alright, so you can see that within the department service we have an issue with the host. Now what I'm going to do is, within the service itself, we are making that, it's going to be HTTP then // ideally. That's all that we need to do. Sorry for the miss. So we need to make HTTP then / localhost 881, and once that application is started, now we can make the call. Now let me open the department service, clear terminal. Now once you make this call, you'll be able to see that now we were able to select two departments, and in order to us, you can see that now for each particular employee we have the department ID, and also we have the department response, which has the additional information about the department itself, right? So you can be able to see that for each particular employee you are able to make use of this one. Then this one has a case which you'll be able to handle in our next session. So for now, let's try and reach this particular point whereby you're able to make the call to an external service, looping through each particular entry and setting the department response. So making the call to the other service to send us the data, and we are blocking that to get the department response, and we are setting that particular department response within the employee itself. Then we are returning the actual list which has already been adjusted. So that's all that we wanted to learn today for the web client. So making the web client calls to an external service. In our next session, we'll be able to see why when we have a lot of data within the employee list, why is it performance impactive whenever we are making each call to get the department for each particular employee. It's going to be IO extensive. So if we have 1,000, then it means that we are going to make 1,000 requests to the department service. So we are going to see a way in which we can be able to get all the employee or the department IDs for this particular list that we have, and then from that list we are going to send that particular IDs to the department service to get a list of departments with those IDs, and then from there we can now proceed with just one particular single call. That is the next point we are going to learn in this particular section of making external calls to another service to get data which will be set to the current one. Alright, thank you. Remember to subscribe, comment, criticize the video, and let me know opportunities for improvement, and remember to share the video for other guys to learn the same. Thank you. Bye bye.